Thank you, Madeline. Let me see if I can get there we go, presentation view. Shifting gears to weather, I think our bottom line here, summarizing, we've got a few more days of really summer-like weather coming, but there are some changes on the horizon, and I'll talk about those here in just a second. Looking at the last week, though, first, we're starting off there. We started off, as you probably remember, a little cooler than, well, a little cooler than normal, and it's warmed up over time. And of course, now we've got typical upper Midwest summer weather here, sticky, humid conditions, etc. And again, those are going to continue for a couple more days. But if we look at the last week, it turned out that our mean temperatures for the week average out pretty close to normal, except in the far north. And you can see there the temperatures are a degree or two above normal on average. Most of lower Michigan, and again on the left here, really close. And then you can see a couple patches just in the southwestern corner of the state where it was actually a little cooler than normal. And that goes back to that early part of last week where it was relatively cool. In terms of precipitation, it really depended on where you were. In the middle here, these are 1 week totals through yesterday, and some spots had less than 1/4 of an inch. Notably here, and I'm going to talk about this just a moment here, notably northern parts of the state, especially western upper Michigan, portions of, and also eastern upper Michigan, where in some cases there was no precip at all. Contrast that with the northern lower, where we had many areas here, and the ones in yellow are more than two inches or more. Also had more rain, amazingly, and this is another theme for certainly the last several weeks, but what are the normal conditions across large portions of southern and eastern lower Michigan? You can see that down here, but again, most areas picked up fairly healthy amounts, especially in lower Michigan, but it was significantly drier. And then on the far right here, once again, we are looking now at a longer term. These are 30-day departures from normal, expressed in percent of normal. And I guess one of the thoughts I'd like to leave you with is this, in terms of where you are, depending on where you are, we have areas of northern Michigan now that have had less than 50% of normal rainfall for the last several weeks, and especially up in western upper Michigan. But contrast that with much of southern and southeastern lower Michigan, where in some cases we've had more than 200% of normal. And again, just heavy rain, one event after another, very, very active storm track across the upper Midwest. And that's why we've had, well, weather to say the least, but very, very wet weather. And our landscapes, and we're now looking at the vegetation drought response index, VegDry, sometimes people call it. This is a combined product that looks at satellite information and basically and also combines it with some data from the surface. So what we're seeing here is the general across the landscape. We're looking at the availability of water, and it's essentially looking at temperatures of the vegetation, and of course, the more water is available in the landscape, the lower those temperatures are during the day, and that's how that index works. But in this, as we look at this across Michigan for the last, well, this is from the 28th, looking at a summary. That's the most recent one we have. There are some areas, especially in western upper, that with browns and yellows here that indicate lack of water. So we've got some warmer canopy temperatures, etc. But as you move south and east, especially down to, again, southwestern, south central, and east central lower Michigan, look at all the greens there. Abundance of water, more water, some cases than the landscape can hold, but obviously no shortage. And of course, for several of our crops, especially corn and even soybeans, now we're at or even past some of the most sensitive stages. So we've gone through that this year. That's one of the big challenges, of course, is making it through those sensitive stages of growth stages. That especially in that part of the state, that is definitely not an issue this year. It's actually, if anything, there's too much water. We've had more than 10 inches of rain, by the way, during the month of July, and we're looking at the numbers for that right now, since it's just started the new month. But we probably have set some new records for all-time July, wettest July on record, or we'll be close anyway at several locations. So if it really seems unusual, it is certainly by climatological standards. Now, let's look at degree days. And we've had a similar pattern almost all the season, and we looked at a relatively normal week. But our base 50 growing degree accumulations, and this is using the 8650 cutoff method here, so the same numbers that you get on the back, a seed corn bag. But with assuming a May 1 start, the numbers now range from about 1,100 in the far northern parts of the state, current accumulations, to about 1,800 in the far south. And on the right-hand side here, these are the departures from normal. And so a little bit like the precip, we've got two different things going on. We actually have some minor deficits, maybe only 25 to 50 units in the far northwestern part of the state, up in western upper Michigan. Over most of lower Michigan, we have surpluses, especially in the southeast, and in those cases, as much as 150 units. That's fairly significant in terms of the surplus we have. It's been that way for much of the growing season, and a lot of that surplus dates back to the month of May and June when we were consistently warmer than normal. It's been much closer to normal during the month of July than it was earlier in the growing season. But those surpluses that we developed there are still there. And I had a couple actually people sent questions and asking about this, the first ones of the season, but where are we right now relative to normal, and do we have anything to worry about for the fall? And so I'm using the U2U corn maturity tool because it's really a really good way to do a sort of a spot check on where we are. This is for Ingham County, but it's representative of much of Michigan, so that's what the specific numbers. This assumes a 101 day hybrid, relative hybrid, maturity hybrid for Ingham County with a May 10th planting. So that's the assumption, maybe a little bit later than some of you were able to plant, but this shows the accumulations of those 8650 cutoff methods. That's the green line here. Those are observed totals. The purple line here is the climatology, the long-term climate for the area. And what you can clearly see, as we just saw in the last diagram here, that we have a surplus of growing degree days. We're ahead. And if you look at climatological and the projections of what comes in the future, we're likely to have that surplus at the end of the season. And in this case, we need about just under 2,500 units for maturity for this particular hybrid example that we're using here. We finish off probably about a calendar week ahead of normal. So what do those surpluses translate to? Well, we were at the end of the season right now, and right now this one says that we will reach black layer with this particular hybrid about the at the end of the third week of September. And the other part that's, of course, many people have to consider, all these blue lines here, these are the first occurrence of 28 degree Fahrenheit or lower in the fall. So when we see the first killing freeze, and it gives you a good idea. And of course, the good news here is that playing this game and making these assumptions, if nothing else changes dramatically, we would be done. We would reach black layer before we typically see that first killing freeze in the fall. And so again, and I've got the site location here. If you're interested, you can go and put in any numbers you want. If you've got a really long hybrid, you can play that game. You can also go for a shorter or mid-season. But again, it's nice to see hypothetically, given what climate gives us and where we are right now, where could we end up? So this says that we're in really pretty good shape in regard to maturity and heat accumulation. But that said, a caveat, we'll look at the forecast because there are some changes coming that will have some influence on what we just saw. In the outlook here, looking ahead, we've got a weather system, a weak low pressure system this morning out over close to Rochester in southeast Minnesota. That system is going to slowly move to the east and south over the next 36 hours and actually just clip the far southwestern corner of the state. That's really the next major weather system to impact us. Much of the state will see some rainfall with this, but especially across southern and central regions of the state. We'll see much less as you move north and east up into the northern lower and into eastern upper Michigan. The radar here currently looking down at the lower left, or a recent pic here, you can see some shower and thunderstorm activity out there. So what we'll see today is a little bit of a repeat of yesterday with more clouds, and then we'll see showers and thunderstorms develop probably by evening in far western parts of the state, especially west central, southwest, and western upper Michigan. And that area will gradually and slowly move to the east and south overnight and into tomorrow. Here's the weather map for tonight. You can see not a whole lot of change. The green area there that you're seeing is where do we expect precipitation with this. And you can see in this case, it's looking like the southern upper and much of lower Michigan. Greatest odds, greatest probabilities, and highest totals for precip over the next day to 2 days will be across the south, especially the southwest. But we'll be generally seeing here with this weather system, and it moves on. Here's Friday tomorrow morning. You can see the center of the low makes it down to the southwest corner of the state. The rain continues, showers continue, and then basically by Saturday, you can see it finally has moved off to our south and east. But overall, we're looking at fairly widespread quarter to half inch totals, with some areas getting more than that and some areas getting less, especially as you move again into the northern part of the state. Now, the other I think important thing to note here is you look at the frontal boundary. Look at this frontal boundary here, cold front off to our north and west. And this is tonight. Here's tomorrow morning, and here is Saturday. You can see that it's gradually making it south and eastward into Michigan. That's going to finally, there's actually, and you can barely see it at the top here, big blue H. That's a Canadian high pressure system or center. That's going to be down here by the end of the weekend and into early next week. That's a definite or noticeable change. So we will see, while we would see a continuation of above normal temperatures, mostly mid to upper 80s with high humidity here today, and even parts of tomorrow, still going to be unusually warm. Lows only in the upper 60s to near 70. And Saturday and Sunday right now look very warm and dry, fair skies after that system moves out, but still above normal. But then finally, this air mass makes it down by Monday. We will see noticeable cooling. And so our high temperatures by Monday, Tuesday, and into the middle of next week, only in the mid to upper 70s. So big noticeable change in temperatures. Low temperatures only in the 50s, or mostly in the 50s. So and that's actually not too far away from our normals. We'll maybe be a degree or two below, but a big change expected next week. And the other part, what about precip? Well, the pattern we're in right now, we've got sort of a weak northwesterly flow aloft here, and Michigan is in the divide, really in the border or boundary area between oppressive heat and humidity to our south and west, and then cooler, more seasonable conditions to our north and in Canada. So we're right in between, with a really active storm track going through the middle of that, as you just saw the weather system here for the next couple of days. But that is going to shift probably to the south and settle a little bit to the south. So our temperatures are likely to be significantly or noticeably cooler next week, and then maybe beyond that, more than that. First of all, though, precip totals for the upcoming week. Next chance for precip after today, tonight, tomorrow, and into very early Saturday. I mentioned the weekend's going to be dry and warm, but probably coming very late on Monday, or more likely on Tuesday and Wednesday. And right now, the guidance is pretty bullish on how much water, how much precip might be available. That probably, or at least has the potential at this point to be significant. So expect, and what you're seeing here, this is the 1 week total projected or potential precipitation for the upcoming week. You can see a very strong northeast to southwest gradient across the state, from below normal totals in the far north, some cases less than a quarter of an inch expected the whole week, to more than 1.5 inches in the south. And I think that's probably a good bet. It certainly reflects what we'll see over the next 1 to 2 days. It's also taking into account that next weather system next week, especially on Tuesday and Wednesday. There could be significant rain, probably will be significant rain with that as well. So the wetter than normal pattern for some parts of the state, especially in the south, continues. I think that's one of the bottom lines here. Our evaporation demand, these are the reference potential evapotranspiration totals through next Wednesday. Pretty close to climatological normals. So about 1,500s to 1,700s per day on average. Some days are going to be a little bit higher than that, some a little bit lower, but overall, that's what the climatology says. That's where we should be for the first week in August. So no big real message there. There is, though, again, looking beyond this, where are we going to go? I mentioned there's some changes in the jet stream. There's a lot of lines and colors on this. I apologize for that, throwing all that out here, but the medium range forecast guidance is now pretty consistent in suggesting a change or pattern change coming up here during the next week to 2 weeks. This is the current upper air pattern that we're in and will be in the next few days, with, again, a gradual, warm and heat at the beginning with a gradual cooling off. This is the forecast upper air pattern over North America here during the latter part of the second week. And the big message is here, look at this big trough carved out over eastern North America. There's a big ridge out over the west. And so with those big ridges and troughs, we expect to see big anomalies It'll be heat conditions underneath the ridge, but much cooler underneath the trough, and that trough is closer than it was. And down and below, I've also taken, these are the projected air temperature anomalies, the differences from normal for the first 5 days. And you can see Michigan's expected in the Great Lakes region generally near to a little bit above normal for the next 5 days. But look what happens here during the second week. We got a lot of blues here and significantly cooler than normal temperatures are expected. So that's the big news in the medium range, is that we are likely looking at least a temporary shift with significantly cooler than normal conditions coming in by the second week. How long does that last? It probably is not a long-term thing, but certainly for a major part of our growing season in terms of the temperatures and heat and so forth, but a big change from what we've seen during a lot of the growing season. And again, that is right now expected during that second week and maybe into the beginning of the third week of August. And so our new 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day are the current ones. They are basically calling, you can see in the upper right-hand side here, strong likelihood of cooler than normal mean temperatures. And what about water? Well, still an active storm track with this and expected to continue. So the areas that have been hit by not just the amounts of precip, but the frequency of precip has been very high as well. That in general is expected to continue. Active weather pattern across much of the state, except for the far north, which is probably going to be drier than it is across the south. So cooler, potentially wetter than normal here, looking at the next couple of weeks. So wrapping everything up here, again, more the same for the near term, but we've got our best chance for organized and widespread precip coming, especially across central and southern areas here over the next 24 to 36 hours. A warm, dry, or very warm, almost hot weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And then, of course, a big change expected early next week with cooler temperatures and the next chance for significant precip coming probably overnight, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and that could be significant. And I'll stop there.